Welcome back to the Christian Capitalist Podcast, everybody. I'm Rich Sanders, your host. Thank you so much for joining us again this week for more engaging conversations about hard work and generous giving to the poor and needy in the name of Jesus Christ. For more information on our movement, you can see our LinkedIn tree or link tree, including our LinkedIn page, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, as well as our website and our link to Amazon so you can buy the book. But today we're so glad to be joined by the founder and Chief Executive Officer of Seniors on a Mission, Joanne Hickox. Good morning, Joanne.
Good morning.
I'm so glad to see you this morning, bright and early. Even though we are in the same state, you are in Jacksonville and I'm in Destin, which means we're about 6 hours away from each other in entirely different time zones.
Yep.
Florida's a big state, but I'm so
Yeah.
glad to meet you. And thank you this morning for coming to join us and talk about Seniors on a Mission. How are you doing this morning?
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
That's great. Well, Joanne, I see you're wearing a logo T-shirt. Can you tell everybody what's on your shirt this morning?
It says Seniors on a Mission.
Fantastic. I love that. Good logo merch to start off our day. So, Joanne, we want to get into Seniors on a Mission and talk about the hard work that you're doing. I love the fact that next to your logo is a cross. It's a beautiful necklace and a representation of why we are here doing our work. And it sounds like why you're there doing your work. But tell us a little bit about yourself. Are you from Jacksonville, Florida originally?
No, actually, I am Canadian. I was born and raised on a farm in Canada and met the love of my life in Toronto, Ontario, working on a television movie. And yeah. And a year later, we got married and I moved to California. And 5 or 6 years after that, the Northridge earthquake happened.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
we were 4 miles from the epicenter. And I looked at my husband under the dining room table as everything was crashing around us.
No.
And I said, I think God's calling us someplace else. So we moved to Florida. You know, at least you get 2 or 3 days notice on a hurricane.
Exactly.
With an earthquake, bang, and you're in it. So
wow. Yeah, no warning
yeah.
and nothing to do but hide under the dining room table. Good grief.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad y'all made it out okay. What made you want to move from California to Florida?
Well, 2 things. Being raised in Eastern Canada, my family, whether they were my grandparents or my parents, they always had a trailer in Florida. And they would come down for a certain part of the winter. And, you know, it went from 2 weeks a year to 3 weeks a year to almost to 6 months a year. So when it came to, and Brian was working on a series of films, and he got this series of films and they said, you know, we need different looks because it needs to look like different cities. And Jacksonville, Florida offered that. Even though it was very flat, there's not a lot of hills here, but there's a lot of different looks architecturally.
Mhm.
So, and there was great crew people here in Jacksonville. So he made the leap, and he phoned me one day and said, "Hey, could you bring me my car?" And I'm like, "I'm in California." "Sure, honey." I mean, he knows I love to drive.
Let me just swing by. That's great.
Yeah. So, you know, we threw the 2 little kids in the back and a nanny, and off we trucked, and we arrived. And the really cool thing was I liked Florida, and I liked the fact that, you know, my parents, my only, you know, I'm the oldest of 47 grandchildren.
Whoa.
My dad was one of 12. My mom was one of, you know, and so but I was the first one born. I was the first grandchild born to this mega family. And now I'm the oldest I'm 85. I'm the oldest of 85 grands and great grands.
Wow.
So
that is one heck of a family reunion.
Well, and my husband is an only child of an only child of an only child. And I'm like, so he didn't care where we lived because he didn't have anybody. And I'm like, everybody's in the north. But at least my mom and dad and a few of my family came to Florida. And I knew that I'd get at least a little. When we lived in California, it was a huge truck for my mom and dad to go that
Sure.
far.
Sure.
So, but when the earthquake happened and the roof slid off and the toilets exploded and everything we owned was on the floor, mostly broken, my dad and my two brothers came and they put our house back together. We put it on the market and we were out of there.
Wow. Yeah, no kidding. All right. Well,
Yeah,
Joanne, I can't help but ask you a question then about this. It doesn't have anything to do with seniors on a mission, but we're
that's okay.
well, but God's calling me to ask you about this, given this experience that you had, this traumatic experience as a result of a natural disaster. This week, the Christian Capitalist is donating all the profits from the sale of our book to the HEB Foundation to help with assisting folks who have survived or are trying to rebuild and just give relief to those who are victimized by the floods in Central Texas last week. What was that like for you as a woman of faith? I mean, you're literally wearing the cross on your neck. What was that like as a woman of faith
Well,
when
and what
everything has fallen apart? Because this is your time to encourage the folks in the hill country of Texas.
and being a Christian in Hollywood, it was another major task.
Yeah.
Um, I've lived through a number of disasters, and I would just tell everyone, keep your eyes on God, because if you take your eyes off of Him and put it on the problem, you will not survive.
Mm.
Um, Survival is truly about faith, and get excited because once you've gone through one trial or tribulation, there'll be another one right around the corner. Sometimes really quickly, and sometimes it takes them a little while.
Right.
But
This
the
is
and
why
the
we have over 100 Psalms, right? There's always a new
hello,
trial and tribulation.
yeah, and there's every time you think you've accomplished something, it's made you stronger in Him, stronger in your faith, stronger to those around you, and then you get hit with another one, and then it's like, okay, I wasn't prepared for this one, but okay, God, you got me through the last one, you're gonna get me through this one. And He is so loving and so kind and so gracious. And the world, we live in a fallen world, we live in a place where tragedies happen, and we're never going to understand them all till we get to heaven. But in the meantime, if we can just trust that, one of my favorite scriptures is, He works all things for good for those who love Him and are called according to His purpose.
Mhm.
Um,
That's
it's
beautiful.
He is the one that gives us I call it stick to itiveness. He
I love that.
Others have said, "Oh my gosh, Joanne, you have such tenacity," and I was like, "Well, other people call that faith, but yeah,
Yeah.
there's a degree of tenacity in faith, because He's always going to be good. He's always going to be our God, and so just keep on trucking, no matter what. It's just stuff. It's just
Yeah.
stuff. If
Yeah.
as long as we've got us and our families, and for people that lose family members, if they know the Lord, they're in a much better place."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know,
Exactly. And if
so
we're blessed, we're going to see him one day.
yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, so you also mentioned being a Christian in an environment, not to pick on Hollywood, they get a bad rap. A lot, the folks in that community get a bad rap a lot of times, but just generally, when you're in a community as a faithful person and you feel like either people aren't with you in your faith or hostile to your faith, what kind of tribulation was that?
Oh, that's a whole different world of tribulation. That's emotional attacks. That's, a lot of times they attack your character, which is, it's funny because it's like, well, keep coming. I mean, you're not going to find anything. I mean, what I have done wrong, I've repented of to the Lord, and I've tried to grow and grow up and grow on. And, you know, it's hard working in an industry where the you either focus on God or you focus on self. And people don't generally understand that. They just think, uh, uh, they don't even know. They don't
Right,
understand.
right. That thought never
Um,
crosses their mind that they would focus on anything else but themselves.
yeah.
Yeah.
And and they don't see themselves as selfish. They just see themselves as productive, as hardworking, as people that are known. They have power,
Mhm.
and that's. I've had a number of occasions where I've worked on shows where I got absolutely walked on
Mm,
and treaded upon, and it was simply because they knew that they could,
mm.
so they did. So
Because you turn the other cheek.
yeah,
Yeah.
and there's bruises on both sides.
Oh, so Brian was or is a film director, and y'all met working in Canada.
Producer.
Is that what y'all did in Hollywood as well, California?
My husband was a film producer,
Hmm.
is a film producer. He actually just did a presentation last night here in Jacksonville for a bunch of investors for a fabulous project. Unfortunately, I can't talk about it because it is extraordinarily um, secretive at the moment.
Oh, but that's
But
exciting. We'll be praying for him and the
he's
success of his project.
86. My husband is 86 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, like when people say, "Joanne, you've worked with senior adults for 25 years." I said, "Yeah, but I've been married one for 38 years. I mean, give me a break."
This is easy.
Yeah, it's part of who I am.
That's great. That's great. And so, how about you? What were you working on when you lived in California?
I was an auditor, a feature film accountant.
Hmm.
I was a rarity in Hollywood because I was dead honest, and they weren't used to that. It was really funny because there were we would get hired as a pair, like as a producer and an accountant, to work on the same film,
Oh.
only by organizations that were honest. If
Hmm.
they weren't honest, they would never hire both of us. They would hire one of us, and I'd go off and work on a different picture at the time, or he would work on a different picture at the time. But anyone that was dishonest knew that they just knew that two people that were sleeping in the same bed had to be up to no good. And it was funny
Good
because
grief.
we would have pillow talk, and he'd be telling me about what kind of a situation happened on the set, and I'd go, "Okay, honey, we've got to adjust um the daily cost because that's going to have, and I got to, that might even be an insurance claim. Let me talk to them." And blah, blah, blah. So
Oh boy.
our numbers were absolutely perfect because we knew how to adjust, because I had an inside scoop on what was happening on the set, because the accountants are never on the set.
Right.
They're
Right.
they're just they're the after, they get all of the paperwork afterwards. Well, I was getting a day by day, blow by blow what was happening. And so my cost reports were always bang on because I had already pre-adjusted. Hey, we went 3 hours over because there was an accident on set, and da da da. And I knew within my cost reports changed within 12 to 24 hours. And so
Isn't it something?
it was always interesting to see who would hire us and who wouldn't.
Hmm.
And it to us, it was a big tell.
It's so funny. I've never had an opportunity to talk to anyone about the financial aspects of movie making, but I do have a question for you. Jesus tells everybody who starts to build a house without first sitting down and calculating the cost, right? So there's definitely a budget, and for every business,
Yep.
typically there's a budget. Um, but time and time again, including this summer with big movies that are coming out, you read it's X million over budget. It's always X million over budget. Why is that so frequently the case for movies like that? From your perspective, is it one thing, or is
Well,
it always just stuff happens?
that's typically only in feature films, not in television shows,
Hmm.
which feature films, the number one man on a set is the director. On a television show, the number one man on set is the producer,
Hmm.
because the producer is the one who hits the budget. The director is the one that creates the amazing, picture.
Yeah.
um, the producer has to say no to the director. Well, when the director is the number one person on the movie set, the director gets what the director wants. And then
Right.
it's the studio that are back there saying, and like he's like, if I don't get my way, I'm just not going to do the best picture. Well, if you don't get the best picture, you don't get the best box office, you don't get.
Right.
So uh, some, not all, but quite a few of feature film directors are very egotistical. Their ego is,
Right.
bigger than the picture. And and they want it because it represents them.
Right. It's
That
their art.
picture, it's their art. And so it has to be that much, and you have to push it that much farther, and you have to make people work 19 hours rather than 16. And so it all becomes about ego. That's why feature films go over budget.
Isn't that interesting? What a terrific answer. And so when you were working on these shows or these movies as an accountant in California, Brian moves to Jacksonville to start doing his work there. Were you able to continue that work in Jacksonville? To
I
continue being an accountant?
Well, understand that when we moved to Jacksonville prior to the earthquake, I sat on the couch with my husband and said, "Sweetheart, we are going to get a divorce if we don't get this figured out," because he had been home 11 days 1 year,
Oh,
and
wow.
the year prior to that, he was home 30 days.
Wow.
And you can't raise a young family and be in different, we weren't only in different states, we were in different countries working on
Wow.
pictures because we went in different directions. And then we had this wonderful picture in Paris where we both got to work there for 6 months. It was phenomenal. But we got home from that and said, for the sake of our family, our children, and our marriage, we need to, one of us needs to get out of the movie business.
Mm.
And that was going to be me. And so when we moved to Florida, the whole goal for me was to find a retail business that we thought I could run and get out of the business. So he continued to work like mad in Florida. There was a big, I mean, Florida used to be Hollywood. I don't know if you know that.
No.
Jacksonville was the hub of Hollywood. What 70 years ago.
Wow.
And yeah, and I think it was, I'm not 100% sure, you'd have to quote, I don't quote me on this, but I think it was the Baptist church that run them out of town, and they went to California.
Wow.
And it was just too bad because,
Yeah,
at
too
least
bad for a
here,
lot of reasons.
here in the Bible Belt, we might have been able to have a little, but it did its course, and lots of Hollywood producers now are, well, there are a great number of Christian Hollywood producers and directors. I mean, Master Media was an incredible ministry that worked inside of Hollywood to bring people to Christ and to and enable things to happen and to pray with people. I mean, they currently have, Master Media has a 3-month calendar of one star and one producer to be praying for over
Wow.
the course of every year. And Larry Poland, oh my gosh, he was one of my husband's dearest friends, and Larry Poland ran that ministry, and it changed Hollywood.
Isn't that wonderful? And so
Yeah.
you're using past tense. Is Master Media still around?
Master Media is still around. Larry Poland has gone on to glory with the Lord.
Uh, gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. So what retail business did you end up pursuing in Jacksonville?
It's a little company called Barbecues Galore, and
Okay.
it was a barbecue equipment store.
Okay.
And my mother-in-law had passed away. We took that inheritance. We moved to Jacksonville and invested into Barbecues Galore. We had, I was not a business person. I could have learned a
Really?
lot from you.
You sure do a good job sounding like a business person,
Yeah.
Joanne.
Well, I was a farmer. I was a farmer who I love people, and I'm a people person. And so, yeah, my dad, when I was on the farm and I was in high school, dad said, Joanne, I know you want to study film, but I need you to take something that so that when you fail in the movie business, you can come home and work for the local dentist. So I studied typing,
Thanks for the
and
encouragement, Dad.
yeah, hey, listen, he paid for my schooling. I can't complain. But he was a hardcore farmer, country
Yeah,
guy.
yeah,
He didn't understand Hollywood and the film industry. And why would in the world would his little girl want to do this?
yeah.
And but I wanted the business side of it. In fact, my first picture, I had won I had entered a contest in my final year at Humber College, and it was mostly for the director types, so all of these, I was competing with 7 or 8 other guys, and I was the only one that walked in with a production board, which is the business side of making a movie. Well, one of the judges, which, it was all about directors. They all wanted the new hot young director that was going to be
Right.
coming forward. And the production manager, who was one of the judges, took a look at my board and went, hey, you've got potential. I'm going to get you a job on a film. Well, little did I know that this job was, I was a glorified coffee getter. I was a PA.
Right.
And that happened for a number of movies. I mean, I worked with John Ritter on a show, and I was Starbucks before there was Starbucks, because I was the craft service person, and I had to have the snacks and the coffee and well, one day I just threw a whole bunch of cinnamon in the great big coffee pot. We're talking coffee pot, the ones that stand this tall,
Right,
and they're
right,
this big.
right.
And I just threw some cinnamon, and I had cut up some oranges, and I peeled the oranges off, and so I kind of scraped up the oranges, and I threw the oranges and the cinnamon in, and I waited to see what happened. And they were like, wow. And they actually, in one of the scenes, they didn't tell me, but Sharon Gless and John Ritter were doing a scene, and they were sipping coffee one evening, and they were talking about my coffee and how the flavor. And I'm like,
That's great.
I was
I haven't heard
Starbucks.
those names in a long time. That's wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I have such a wonderful story of that movie, but I digress. Um,
And now you're famous for having created your own coffee blend. I love that.
yes, yes. Before Starbucks.
That's fantastic. All right, so now you're in Jacksonville. Brian's running around still doing production. And by the way, that teaches me something too. I always thought directors were on site and producers were back at the studio, wringing their hands, waiting for the movie cost to come in. So it sounds like he was on site a lot more than what I at least envisioned a producer would do. Is that right,
Yeah.
or was he also directing?
Good producers are on set a lot.
Hmm. Okay.
And now, like I said, on a feature film, while they're not the number one man, they are the number two. So if they have a good relationship with the director, they can work together.
I see.
And if you get a director who um, is aware of the fact that, listen, it's a world where there's so much money and so much fraud and so much chaos.
Mm.
Finding even decent people is a blessing, and you do what you do, and you make a good show, and you hope that it makes a lot of money for everybody. I mean, the bottom line is the feature film industry is about making money for a lot of people, and a lot of people make good money. They
Yeah.
work their little fannies off, but it's hard work. I mean, you go into it knowing it's a minimum of a 14-hour day.
Wow.
So yeah, and so it's just and you work so intensely together, you become family. And then all of a sudden the movie's over, and it's like getting a divorce in the family, and everybody's like,
And everybody's
and
heading off in different directions.
and then they are unemployed. So all that hard money that they earned, now they better take care of themselves and their families during the drought, because
Yeah.
film industry, there are very few that actually make really good livings at it, and you see them in the tabloids all the time. It's the
Hmm.
people that work that behind them that are the ones that are fighting to make a real living, and the young writer that has to be a waiter for his entire life until he gets his big break. And
That's
but
the
I've
way it
seen God
goes.
big breaks. I've seen God just catapult people, and I've seen them keep their faith in
Well, so
spite
speaking of which, I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead. In spite of what?
in spite of the craziness in Hollywood. There are solid Christians who have turned down, and also, there's the crazies, and then there's the people that stand for their faith, and it's the people in between that I'm most concerned about, because they're not being discipled as much. And you hear about these and you hear about these, but there's so many people in the middle.
Mm.
And it's funny, that's kind of where, when God put me into ministry, um, it was the people in the middle that he's always called me to. I've never been, although I do. Yeah. Anyway, ask
Well, no,
me another
no,
question.
we'll get into that in just a second. Before we leave off of Hollywood, though, and Christians in Hollywood and God being in people's lives in the movie industry, I can't help but think one of the most popular movie movies of the year is Christian, right? The Chosen came out in theaters around the nation, and it's kind of a blend of TV series and a movie. At least in many communities that I have heard about, the first 2 or 3 episodes I think came out as it's like a feature film. Um, but what do you think is the trend of faith-based movies, in particular Christian movies? Is that growing in Hollywood, or is that simply there's one popular one, and this is really still kind of a micro segment of the film industry?
It's definitely growing.
Good,
It's
good,
been on the grow for a while. Um, the skills and the talents and the people that help, like all of the cast and crew, um, you know, there was a season when if you said you were a Christian, you were ostracized. And, I mean, in a way, we still are. I mean, we're not a majority in the film industry by any, but studios have come to realize that there's a market for Christian product.
it's all about making
So,
money in Hollywood, right?
bottom line, does it make money? And for a long time, they were determined that the only films that could make movie money was R-rated. And I'm so impressed with the producers, directors, writers. We cannot forget our writers. Everything starts, just like for a restaurant, it's location, location, location.
Right.
For the movie industry, it's a script, script, script.
Mm.
And but there's also been infiltration. There were good scripts that got infiltrated at the studio level with garbage and
Mm.
societal garbage. But, Hollywood is a part of changing. Hollywood has always been a part of changing society.
Mm.
And there's been an agenda for a long time. There still is. But people are becoming aware of it and are going, whoa, 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 whoa. And so there's better products, there's better, and with the onset, for the longest time we had 3 stations,
Right.
NBC and ABC and CBS. That's all there was for a very long time. Young people today can't understand, what do you mean you only had 3 stations?
Right. And you turned them like this.
You turned them. Yeah. It's like, yeah. I mean, my father-in-law worked at NBC. He worked at 30 Rock.
Wow.
And so, but Hollywood is Hollywood is Hollywood.
Well, I'm
You
glad to
gotta
know
be,
that Christian and faith-based movies are on the grow. That's a great way
oh
to summarize it. All right, so now we're back in Jacksonville, and you, with an it seems like lifetime of experience in barbecue equipment, open up your retail store, Barbecues Galore. I say that
yes.
somewhat facetiously. Where did that even come from?
Well, my husband loved to barbecue, and he was a great barbecuer, and I just wanted to be out of, and I, I got into Hollywood for as an accountant because I was on a picture. I was supposed to be the production something or other, low on the totem pole. And the then producer walked up to me and said, "Can you add?" And I said, "Of course I can add. What do you mean?" He said, "Well, the production accountant has a $300 petty cash float, and he can't keep it straight." Okay, whatever. So I became the accountant. And the funny thing about that was, I immediately went, because I had just finished college, I went and took a night course, a 101 accounting course, to figure out what a debit and a credit was, because I'd
Wow.
never studied that. I just knew
Yeah.
how to make things add. So I'm working on a picture called Popeye Doyle. I think it was called Popeye Doyle. It was the remake of The French Connection, if
Okay.
you remember that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and so I was working with 20th Century Fox, and my big job was to deal with petty cash, which I'm great with petty cash. I was just to count up the front, the ledger, and make sure that it totaled at the bottom. And that was my job. That's all I did on that feature film for 20th Century Fox. Well, I finished my class, and I started opening up the containers of the money to make sure that the receipts matched what was on the front, because it's got to match.
Right.
They didn't match,
Mm.
and I took them to the uh, head accountant, the big cheese, and he screamed at me. And like, we were in a room no bigger than a small bedroom, and with no windows. I mean, it was a horrible office. I had the desk right near the door, and he had the desk at the back of the room. And for an entire week, he never spoke to me. We were in a room that small, and he never spoke to me. And I never touched petty cash again. Well, I got a call from Aaron Spelling about
Wow.
3 months later, saying, "Hi, Joanne. My name is Aaron Spelling." I'm like,
Exactly. I know who you are.
in Canada, thinking I'm talking to the biggest cheese in the world. And he said to me, "Joanne, I understand you were on the accounting team for a show called Popeye Doyle, which is a show he produced. It was part of his show package with 20th Century Fox." And I said, "Yes, sir. How can I help you?" He said, "Joanne, could you just tell us maybe what did anything interesting happen on that?" So I told him about the whole petty cash ordeal. And he said, "Thank you very much, Joanne. We will be getting back to you." Turns out the accountant stole $250,000 through petty cash,
Whoa.
and had a Coke addiction. And he ended up getting fired. But
Man.
I ended up getting the
Yeah, exactly. You found it out. Isn't that
of Aaron
something?
Spelling, and then I got to work on a whole bunch of other films, and I got hired by NBC and ABC because they knew I was honest. So they would bring me in. We had one problem show. I did Murphy Brown. I did
Oh, that's great.
Mancuso. Mancuso was where they thought they had somebody stealing, so they brought me in. I should have been a forensic auditor
It
because
sounds like you were.
yeah. And it was actually, I was, because, in math, everything has to balance. I mean, it doesn't work.
Right.
And so, anyway, it turns out it was just a mistake. And they had hired someone who really didn't know what they were doing in accounting. And so there was double entries all over the place, and I figured it all out. And so that was, I apologize. I went back into the movie business, but that was one of my
That's
specialties.
fantastic. So, but ultimately, you're running a barbecue business. Joanne, we've spent 15, 20 minutes talking about your extensive accounting background. How on earth do you conclude you weren't good at business? I mean, it seems to me like you could teach
Um,
this.
because I was. not accustomed to retail being 6 days or 7 days a week.
Uh,
And I mean, I'm accustomed to working 6 and 7 days a week for a period of time. And then you have nothing, in the
yeah,
movie business. This was grinding. This was
yeah.
grinding. And the company went public and called our loan, and we lost everything in a 36-hour period because we had personally signed the leases. And
Oh
when,
no.
we had one store, and we were just building the second store. We had built it out. It was gorgeous. It was um, but in Florida, a lot of people don't spend big money on grills because you burn them out, and two years later they're rusted out, and you
Right.
just throw it on the garbage and you do another one, or you throw some guts in it and you try to make it last another year. And we were selling high end grills, and
Mm.
so we very quickly, and when the company went public and they called our loan, and we literally lost everything in 36 hours. So when
Oh,
I
I'm
talk
so
about
sorry.
tragedies,
I was just thinking of that. It's like to many small business owners, the description of the Northridge earthquake that you gave us earlier in this episode is very, very similar emotionally to what
yep,
you went through when your loan got called. Don't you think?
yep, yeah, because you lose everything in a nanosecond, and it's gone. And it's like, okay, was that business so much a part of me that that's me dying,
Yeah.
as
Right.
opposed to did I steward it? And I learned a very interesting lesson about stewarding.
Ah, this
um,
is great. See, the Christian capitalist is all about hard work and generous giving to the poor and needy in the name of Jesus. And when we talk about working hard, the kind of the motto of our movement is the more we make, the more we give. And we try to glorify God in our work, in whatever work we do. But it is a simple fact that not every job is successful, not every business survives. And so, what was that like in terms of the challenge to your faith after surviving the Northridge earthquake, now moving out to Florida, and the business just evaporates in a day and a half?
Um, it was to that point, it was one of the hardest things we have ever survived.
Mm.
And understand that, you know, we'd already had a number of huge tragedies in our lives. And if you don't have God in the center of your life, surviving yet another tragedy, a financial tragedy, is huge. I mean, the bankrupt people came in, and they checked the ring on my finger. They checked my earrings. They counted the number of underwear in my panty drawer.
What?
Yeah, it was the most humiliating. I'd never experienced anything like that in my life. And I just I was in shock. We were each allowed to keep $1,000. There's $1,000 in the bankruptcy that you can keep. Well, we had a $2,000 deposit on the house we were renting. So Brian declared that thousand, and I declared the other thousand. So the people that we were renting the house from never found out that we went through a bankruptcy, because we were in a like a lease to own our
Hmm.
potential.
Hmm.
And so we went from being Hollywood film producers to the poorest church mouse.
Yeah.
I mean, the people that we thought were the poorest church mice in the church brought us bags of groceries. We couldn't afford to put at that time. Our house was filled. It was heated with oil. We couldn't put oil in the tank.
Wow.
So all of a sudden, we had two huge fireplaces in this all glass brick, the terrazzo floors. I mean, it was a phenomenal house, old but phenomenal, and it sat right on the water. So the wind blew and chilled the house something
Yeah, of
awful.
course. Of course.
The church actually had a truckload of firewood dropped at our front door for us,
Wow.
because I mean we had no heat. people were bringing us food. And then a man who wanted to be in the film industry but realized he could make more money in stock. He he came to us. He was a solid Christian. Came to us, stayed at our home, and said, "How much is your belongings?" And we just kind of told him what we thought they were gonna, and the bankruptcy court accepted 10 cents on the dollar. He bought all of our belongings for us.
Wow.
And so we were able to keep our furniture and everything, because it was going to be sold off. It was going to be sold at auction.
Wow.
And we didn't have fancy stuff, but we had stuff that had history, that had family, that had attachment to it. And so he bought our furnishings. And then, sure enough, my husband got prostate cancer. So, you know, yeah. If when I said you get tribulations after tribulation
Yeah.
after
Yeah.
tribulation, and I was sitting at the end of the dock one day. I made this practice of always going and sitting with the Lord, and I wore a the movie that I did with uh, John Ritter was in Canada in the middle of winter. So as a gift for everybody, they bought us a parka. And
Okay.
I don't know what a parka is, but it is. I mean, you can
Yeah.
survive in a parka in the middle of a
Yeah.
winter. And so here I am in the middle of winter in Florida. It's not, there's no snow,
It's
but
not
it's
Canadian
cold.
winter. Right. Right. Right.
It's cold because the water gets cold, and it's so I'm putting on my parka, walking to the end of the dock, sitting down there crying my eyes out, going, God, I don't know what I'm gonna do.
Oh.
And all of a sudden he said, Joanne, I want you to go get your BA in biblical studies. What? I'm like, okay. So I went and got my BA in biblical studies, and I came back to the end of the dock every night, and checks would $300 checks would show up, and that would cover the insulin for our young child, because we had, and
Wow.
more food kept coming, and miracle after miracle, and this happened and that happened, and it was just like, okay, so I've finished my BA in biblical studies. Now what, God? Because
Right.
I mean, I was busy taking care of a husband who, prostate cancer is not a lot of fun. And he did cryosurgery, which at that point, that was many years ago, but it was something that, people that they froze the cancer. And anyway, that was another whole season, but
That's a whole
yeah,
nother thing, and does and sounds expensive.
yeah.
Yeah.
And people constantly calling for money and wanting money. And Brian finally got another picture, and I'm like, God, what do you want me to do? I assisted for a little while until I figured out exactly, where I was supposed to go. And then God said, I want you to get your master's in theology. And I'm like, okay. So I looked into that, and it required 500 hours of community service.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay. So I went to my pastor, and my pastor said, well, what can you do, Joanne? And I'm thinking all of the accounting things, right? Like I'm
Right.
like, I can do this. Because by this time now I'm an expert, because I've been doing it for 15 years, and I still don't have, I got 101 accounting. That's it.
That's
But
all I heard you mention. I just wanted to make sure you never got your CPA or anything. That's funny.
no, but I could run circles around most CPAs,
Yeah,
not in
exactly.
the tax area, but you know, working in the film industry is just a glorified bookkeeper. That's all you got to do, because you get a budget, the money comes in, you got to account for it. And so I was a phenomenal bookkeeper. Um, but I went and talked to my pastor, and he said, come back to me with a list. And I went back to him, and I went down the list, and at the very bottom, I wrote, I could work with senior adults. And he went down the whole list and went, I have 4 senior citizens that haven't come to church in a decade. I want you to minister to those 4 people.
Wow.
And I'm from the movie business, where, I'm accustomed to commanding hundreds of people. like not commanding, but
Right.
I hold the money for hundreds of people.
Right.
And it was, you want me to work with 4 senior adults? Okay. So I did. And that's another whole chapter of my
And
life.
here you are. How long ago was that you got your master's and your pastor said, spend
Oh,
your
no,
community
no, no.
for
I
Christ?
never finished the master's.
Oh.
I started doing the 500 hours worth of service. I think I did 2 classes, and I was having so much fun doing ministry. And you have to understand, I had really wanted, I was 7 in the Catholic Church in the farm territory, and I knew I was going to be a priest. I just knew it.
Hmm.
And I got to be 12 years old and realized you had to be a man.
Right.
And I was
Right.
like, oh, okay. And I really didn't want to be a
Right.
nunship did not turn me on at all. I was not excited. But I could say the entire Catholic mass. Like I could say exactly what the priest said from the time I was 7. I knew I
So,
was called. But I was shocked when they said you had to be a man. I was like, oh, okay. Well, in that case, so I always wanted, once I joined this non-denominational church here in Jacksonville and really fell in love with the Lord in a whole different way, um, I wanted to get ordained. That, that was my, and every time somebody got ordained at my church and I didn't, I literally, at one point, my best friend's daughter got ordained. And I'm sitting there going,
yeah. What about me, God?
what about me? And I literally, when she got ordained, I had to get up and walk out of the church because I was crying so hard.
Oh,
And because I was so hurt. I was so hurt because I knew I had it. I knew there was a calling on my life. I've known it my entire life. And I walked out of the church, and there was a number of people that they started rallying around me in the church to say, yes, why aren't you getting ordained? And how come you're getting passed over? And you know how you can kind of fall into that?
hmm,
And then it was like, whoa, 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 stop, just stop. It's going to happen in God's timing. And I don't know when that is, but so I'm doing this for senior adults. And I don't know if you remember, but 25 to 29 years ago, there was a huge problem with televangelists
sure.
bilking senior citizens out of money.
Yeah.
So I'm coming onto the scene right smack dab in the middle of all of that chaos in the church. And I'm calling them saying, hi, I'm from your local church and I just want to love on you. And, can I come for a visit?
Oh,
Click,
sure.
click, click.
Right.
I phoned them and I wrote them every month for 9 months. And I couldn't, there was no breakthrough. And I finally phoned my pastor and I said, Steve, I am obviously not cut out for the ministry.
Hmm.
I have not made headway in 9 months with any of these people. And he started laughing. And I'm like, what are you laughing at? I mean, I'm crying. I'm hysterical. I'm sad. I'm like, I've just realized that the calling that's been on my life is absolutely not happening. And he's laughing. And I said, what? What? And he said, Joanne, every time you have called Jim has called me and he has swore up a storm. He was a retired military that was really badly hurt and he went off of his meds for a long time. Well,
Hmm.
when someone's off their meds, things that come out of their mouth can
Right.
often be not very gracious.
Right.
So he
It's a
was
beautiful way to say
swearing
that.
at he was swearing at my pastor. Every month he would phone my pastor and swear and get that do re mi fa woman out of here. Don't ever call me. I don't want her no more. And then my pastor would have a 20-minute conversation with him. And my pastor said to me, Joanne, I haven't had as much conversation with that man in the last 2 decades as I've had in the last 9 months because you've called him. You've been faithful. And he's faithfully called me to complain about it. it.
To cut him out. The Lord
And
indeed works in mysterious ways, Joanne.
crazy. And there's more to that story, but are you needing to stop?
No, we got all the time. I want to hear the rest of that story.
Okay. Well,
So do our listeners.
so, I was in the movie business. So there was a crew of people, young people, that went into high schools to do Christian dramas. And they were here in Jacksonville. And they were having a season of burnout. They'd been at it for a couple of years, and the head of it, Jason, yeah, Jason, yeah, Jason, he called me, he said, Joanne, I don't know what to do. And he loved my husband because in his heart, he was a film producer, and he is a film producer now. And Jason said, what can we do for the team? I said, I tell you what, Jason, I know exactly what to do. Start fasting as of 6 o'clock the night before. Show up at my house at 8 o'clock in the morning. Don't anyone say a word. Ring the doorbell. I'll know you're here. I will tell you, come in, you sit them down. Now remember, these are actors. These are people that have never shut up in their life. They are always on. They're always,
Right.
it's what they do. And they're young, they're teenagers. So they walked into my house and I took them up the stairs. I sat them down in the living room and I gave them the schedule of the day. You can go rake the lawn. You can go pick up the twigs. You can pull the weeds out of my flower beds. But here's the schedule. I have all of your names, and I want you to go to the end of the dock. There's a piece of paper and a pen at the end of the dock. No one is allowed to talk to anything or anybody. You can go to the end of the dock and talk to the Lord. I need you to pray, and I need you to write down what the Lord is telling you while you're out there. You continue to write down whatever you need to write down for yourself personally, but you work, and I will let you know when supper's ready. But till then, there's the buckets of water. You just drink as much water as you want. Now we're teenagers, starving teenagers who are quiet for an entire 24 hours. We broke the fast at 6 o'clock that night. I'd been cooking all day. I got to tell you, the house was like outrageously good.
Oh, I'm sure it smelled wonderful.
They were not allowed to have electronics or anything. So what they didn't know is while I was cooking, I was praying and asking for a word for every one of them. So at supper, we started by saying grace and what we were thankful for that day. Well, the food almost went cold because they were so incredibly thankful. They'd never experienced anything like that in their life. And then I brought the sheet in and what the Lord had prayed over the city is to them had matched what another organization had done a day of prayer for the city, directly for the city. And they didn't know, neither one of them knew. But when we brought those two things together, they were absolutely identical. Said in different tones because, these were teenagers and these were full-grown adults. But, I mean, it was amazing. And then I gave them their words and everybody's bawling around the table. So we're scarfing down the last of the food and they're getting out of there. I've had enough of them. They've had enough of me. And I have a key lime pie left over. And I'm like, okay, God, what you want me to do with this key lime pie? Because it's not staying in my house. I ate more sugar than I'm ever going to eat again for the next 2 weeks. And he said, Joanne, cut it up and take it to your 4 senior adults. So this was month 10. And I showed up at Jim's house, the gentleman who was off his meds and, screaming and yelling at the pastor. And I knocked at the door. And I don't know if you remember what Speedo shorts look like for men.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh, yeah. So this very old man, he had to have been in his mid to late 80s, came to the door in a Speedo short and a bandana on his hair. And that bandana looked like it had been there forever. It was so greasy. I mean, I was just, and I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, oh my God, what have I got myself into?
Exactly.
And I said, hi, Jim, I'm Joanne. I'm the gal that's been calling you for the last 9 months. I was wondering if I could come in and talk with you. And he's looking at my eyeballs, and he's looking at that pie, and he's looking at me, and okay. He let me in. And when I came in, um, I sat on the couch, and I sat at the very edge of the couch because you could hear things running through.
Oh, gross. Okay.
Well, cockroach city. And I looked over to see, he had a wingback chair with the legs cut off of it, and it was on the floor, so that he could have cans of food all around him that he could reach from where he was sitting, and he didn't have to bend over because it was the chair was literally on the ground.
Wow. Okay.
There was half eaten cans of peaches and peas, and there was cockroaches running all through it. And he came back from the kitchen because he had gone to the kitchen. He had unwrapped the pie, went to the kitchen, got a fork, came back and sat down. And he talked to me. We talked for 20 minutes. And he scarfed down that piece of pie like he'd never had a piece of pie like that before.
Wow.
And I looked at him and said, Jim, I'd like to come back again next month. Is that okay? And he said, absolutely, as long as you bring a piece of key lime pie.
I was just going to say, the pie was the key.
Yeah. The walls were so shiny because of the cockroach runs. They just glimmered. But I just kept my eyeballs on his eyeballs. And I spent the next 9 months delivering a piece of key lime pie every month. And then I got him, he trusted me. And by the way, I took the rest of that first pie and I went to the other 3 and it worked fine.
That's great. They loved it.
They loved it. I was in, and over the next 9 months, they trusted me enough. And I said, let's all go out for ice cream together. Just, because I started talking about each of them. And we went out for ice cream. We went to the movie theater. We went to CC Pizza. We just did social things. And one day, one of the ladies said to me, you do so much for us. What can I do for you? And like an absolute idiot, I looked at her and I said, oh, darling, I don't need anything. And you have never felt the Holy Spirit whack somebody on the back of the head fast enough. Because I looked up at her face and realized I just made her the needy and not the needed.
Mm-hmm.
And I turned around and went, oh, shoot, what have I done? What have I done? And I came back and I said, oh, but you know what? I work for a nonprofit organization, and an abstinence organization. I was their CPA, or their chief financial officer, because I'm not a CPA. And I said, we need to stuff 25,000 student manuals. Will you help me do that? And she said, absolutely. And the girl beside her said, I'll help too.
All right.
And that's how Seniors on a Mission, I know it's taken a long time, but that's how Seniors on a Mission got its start.
You know what? I love that. It's only taken 58 minutes to get there. Nice job.
Well, you didn't tell me you wanted it in 10 minutes, because I could do that too.
I don't. Are you kidding? None of that would have been as impactful if we hadn't spent this time talking together. Joanne, there's just so much. The themes, as you know, of our movement are hard work and generous giving. And what you just described is not only critical to understanding the reason our hearts want to give, but the reason that one of the key messages of our movement is that when we give, we are doubly blessed, right? You gave those pies, those pieces of pie to those people, but they in turn not only felt blessed, you had the Holy Spirit right there with you to take the next step into your abstinence nonprofit and then start Seniors on a Mission. It was your generosity that then was reciprocated that led you to where you are today. Unless I'm missing part of the story, it's all about a gift. Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
And you changed Jim's life with just a piece of pie.
Oh, but he came to church, and he had to go to the hospital for 3 days. We tented his house. We cleaned all the garbage out. We washed his clothes. We did it all. I
I'm
mean,
so glad to hear you say that because listen, there are many people, cynical people would say, "Oh my gosh, Joanne's trying to minister to these teenagers, but it's really just help Joanne get her chore list done." Did you ever get that same group of teenagers over to Jim's house to clean it up? It sounds like he really could have used a work day.
no, I didn't. But you know what? Every one of those teenagers' lives were changed.
Yeah.
And that same format God used again much farther along at with Seniors on a Mission at a point where we'll talk about that another time.
Okay. Hey, listen. One of the things that we espouse, that we contend as part of our theology, is that we work to glorify God, and we work because we're made in His image, and we know God works. What called you when these teenagers were adrift? What called you to want to put them to work? Because it seems to me that's a really important part of the story. They spent the day in silence. Sure, they spent the day fasting, but they weren't just sitting around and praying or doodling. They were working.
Yeah.
And to me, that's an important part of the story because we work because we're made in God's image. But what called you to have that idea in the first place? And did you see that work itself out through that day?
Well, understand that I'm raised a farmer and there's
Sure.
always work to be done. Uh,
Sure.
but I also believe that if you have a healthy understanding, like if you have a healthy work ethic, that's a healthy work ethic is like godliness, as
Yes.
far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
And most young people don't understand that. And because they were in the artsy part of it, they worked hard for the Lord. They did, but they had to see work differently to be able to go back to the work that they were doing for the Lord with a different fervor, with
Hmm.
a different understanding. And so I knew that work had to be paired with that seeking of the Lord, because everything we do is seeking, if we're doing it right, everything we do, our work, our play, our relationships, is all about seeking God in the midst of it. And we have to work for a living. I mean, we have to work. We have to eat. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, even people that are homeless on the streets, they work at the corner asking for money.
Right.
I mean, they are asking, they are working towards getting that next meal. It's not the way that God wants it, but it's the way they are doing it. So I always believe that if we do our work unto the Lord, we can never miss. We can never miss.
Amen.
So whether it's
Regardless
falling,
of what that work is, don't you think?
regardless,
Yeah.
whether you're cleaning toilets, whether you're serving tables, whether you're directing a feature film, if you're doing your work unto the Lord and if He's getting all the glory, we're never going to miss.
I also want to point out to you, amen. I also want to point out to you that you're changing lives with a piece of pie through your generosity, but that an important part of your story was benefiting from someone else's generosity when you were in a time of need. That man that came in and bought your possessions through the bankruptcy proceedings uh, showed to me remarkable generosity because it didn't sound like y'all had much of a relationship. He just kind of showed up, maybe from the church, and said, "What can I do?" And next thing you know, uh, his generosity to you was life changing and put you in a position to be generous to others. What do you think about that? And this kind of cyclical nature. What got me thinking about it, Joanne, is when you said that you felt like you offended this woman when she asked if she could help, and you said, "No, I got this." That people want to be needed
Yeah.
and want to help in addition to being helped. How did that? How do you feel about that? Having seen both of those kinds of that side of the same coin in your time in Jacksonville.
I'm going to take it back a little further than that. I'm going to take it back to California, because reciprocal to me, there I have a very, very pointed God thing. Now, understand, I didn't get saved till I was 33. I'd been in the church my entire life, but I
Oh,
didn't have a relationship with Christ until I was 33.
okay.
Um, just prior to that, I had a major testing. I had a missionary move into our home in California from one from Paris and one from Albania, I think. And these were women much farther along in their walk in the Lord than me. And when they left, I decided to go to in California. There's a wonderful monastery, and it was the place where I learned about silence because, in the movie business, it's all about communication.
Yeah.
And they always say a good marriage, if you can't communicate in a good marriage, but in a relationship with God, you have to be able to be in the silence with him. And so I ventured out to this place in the middle of the desert in California where the monastery was for a weekend of silence. And I did it. I mean, understand, as a child, I was called Motor Mouth. That was my name, Motor Mouth. I've learned to
I
contain it
love
a
it.
bit, but anyway, I survived that weekend and went home. And 2 weeks later, I was making the final payment on my favorite car. It was a sedan, gray, 4-door, leather seats. It was gorgeous. And I had had a 5-year payment on it. I made the final payment on it. And I was like, praise the Lord. I'm done. And I had no longer said, hallelujah, this is paid for. God said, now give it away.
Oh.
And I was like, what? And I'm like, I am not hearing God. There is a demon in my house. There is no way
Yeah.
this is I'm not
Yeah.
hearing God. No. And the next day there was a flyer, because as soon as you go to the monastery, now you're on the mailing list.
Right,
And
right,
I had
right.
gotten their mailing, and I read the front cover, and it said, our car broke down and we have no way of getting these monks to the hospital or to the doctor office, or we need a donation of a car. And I went,
Whoa.
okay, God. Okay. So I called them. They came as fast as you could possibly imagine. That car was gone in 2 days.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, God, now what? And we were a 2-car household. So I'm like, actually, we were a 3-car household because we had a crappy little car for the nanny. And all of a sudden, I was driving a crappy little car because I just gave away the treasure that I had spent 5 years paying for. And it was a real lesson on the treasures of your heart.
Yep.
And I had really put a lot of stock in that car. And it was a mom car. I mean, it was my mom car.
And it was paid off.
And it was paid for. I mean, please, God, really? It was paid for. And
Isn't that something?
but understand this. I've had 3 cars given to me since then. And the ministry that I have worked for has leased or bought a car for me every 5 years. I get a different car that's
Isn't that
paid for
something?
now. I'm in the ministry. I have to raise the money for it.
Right, right,
But,
right. But it comes
but
around. So when
I've
you,
never had
isn't that
to.
something? When God blesses us and we share that blessing, we are doubly blessed. And in your case, even more so.
We're not just doubly blessed. God doesn't have a memory of a short. He has all eternity. So when I gave that car away, he knew I was going to need a car the rest of my life. But that was a test. That was a test before had given my whole heart to the Lord. That was a test. And I know I passed the test because cars have been supplied for me ever since.
Isn't that wonderful? Oh, what a
So,
blessing.
yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So it comes
Jo-
around.
yes,
I'm just
indeed.
saying it comes around. And those young people that blessed me by raking the lawn, and they weren't raking my lawn. They were raking the lawn of the Lord. And I know that some of these kids have gone on to do amazing things, and God's blessing them. So
Isn't that
yeah.
wonderful? Oh, Joanne, I would like, we've got just a few minutes left. I would like to invite you back to talk
Okay.
in more detail about seniors on a mission.
Okay.
But first, I want to ask you to tell us a little bit about Seniors on a Mission, just a couple of minutes on that, and then we're going to put a
The
link to that.
elevator pitch.
Yes, ma'am, the elevator pitch. And then we're going to come back for episode
Okay.
2 with Rich and Joanne and talk in
Okay.
more detail about Seniors on a Mission because I want to explore that more fully. But we need to um, first kind of pitch it. What's it called in the movie business? A trailer. We're going to do a
Ah,
trailer.
yes.
We're going to do a trailer for episode 2 where we talk about Seniors on a Mission.
Seniors on a Mission it's a 26-year-old ministry here in Jacksonville. And basically what we do is we take independent, hold on, Seniors on a Mission exists to honor, love, and encourage older adults, inspiring them to live invigorated lives filled with purpose and grace. That's our
Ooh,
mission statement.
okay.
I'm always proud that
Nice.
I can say it.
Well done.
I can remember it. And everything we do is around that. So basically, we take, for the first, until the pandemic, we took teams of anywhere from 15 to 55 people, older adults, on day-long mission trips. They can't go to Zimbabwe and build an orphanage, but they can go to a local nonprofit and work together as a team for 4 hours. We supply a great lunch in the middle of it. And my job as the minister is to nurture their lives, help them to feel the pleasure of God as they work.
Isn't that
And
wonderful?
their job is to bless the community.
And I can't wait to figure out all the different ways that works itself out. Joanne, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We sure do appreciate your story, just tremendous inspirational message this morning, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon for episode 2 to talk in detail about Seniors on a Mission. Thank you so
Amen.
much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank you, audience, for joining us for yet another episode of the Christian Capitalist Podcast. Please feel free to like, share, and follow us on all our social media channels. You'll see here at the end of this show, we'll include show notes that have a link to Seniors on a Mission's website. And stay tuned for the exciting part 2 of our discussion of Seniors on a Mission. I'm Rich Sanders with the Christian Capitalist Podcast, where the more we make, the more we give. Joanne, that was outstanding.